We want to welcome everyone today to the second day of the fall conference, to our program Measuring, Reporting, and Improving Outside Counsel Diversity. Our moderator is Doug Ventola. Our speakers are of Consilio LLC. Our speakers are Ed Blakemore, Assistant General Counsel, Litigation at Rockwell Automation. Shannon Stevens, Claims Manager, Legal Audit at Markel Insurance, and William H. Ng, Shareholder at Littler Mendelson PC. I have a few instructions for the program to read to you. The Asian American Bar Association of New York is certified by the New York State Continuing Legal Education Board as an accredited provider. This program has been approved in accordance with the requirements of the CLE board for a maximum of 1.5 credits, in which 1.5 credit hours will be applied toward diversity and inclusion. This program is suitable for non-transitional New York attorneys only. Transitional New York attorneys will not receive credit. You must have pre-registered and confirmed for this program to receive CLE credit. The first page of the written materials that are provided to you is an attorney affirmation, which you must complete and return to CLE@albany.org. And all of those materials have been provided on our fall conference website. Codes will be announced during this program. Please record the codes somewhere so that you may put them on the attorney affirmation. Please return your affirmation as soon as possible, within a week, so that we can send you your certificate. You received a link for an online evaluation for this session with the written materials. Please kindly complete the evaluation so that we can improve our programs. This program is being recorded for archival purposes. Your continued attendance in this program constitutes your consent to transmit, record, and use your voice, use your voice and image for this purpose, but we are not showing you, so that is not going to be a problem. All right, so with that, I would like to turn the program over to our moderator.
Thank you very much, Margaret, and good morning, everybody. Thank you for joining. I'm going to share my slides to get us started. And boom, there we go. So as Margaret said, we'll be talking this morning about measuring, reporting, and improving law firm diversity. But I think an important element of the conversation and the dialogue as we go through this will be around the collaboration aspect of diversity and improving it, meaning it's both on the corporate law department side and on the law firm side to work together to advance the D&I efforts of both organizations, or both the corporate and law firm side. Now, if I can get my slides to advance, Margaret was kind enough to introduce us, so I will not spend any time on this slide, but I do want to thank my panelists this morning for joining on a Saturday morning. So, you know, where it all kind of started for me, and I've been working with corporate law departments for the past 10 years, helping them manage their outside legal spend. But an important aspect of that is the D&I element, and understanding where your legal spend is going to the outside counsel, whether to diverse or non-diverse attorneys. And really, with Resolution 113 of the American Bar Association back in 2016, I think it was, August, I think, of 2016. So over 5 years ago, that's when it really, I think, clicked for a lot of corporate law departments and a lot of law firms, because the focus really shifted towards, well, you know, who is performing the work, and how, you know, how does my work distribute between diverse and non-diverse attorneys? And are my outside counsel meeting the diversity objectives of who we are as an organization? So even though I had been working with with corporate law departments for 10 years, and that was one of the aspects of the benefits of the work that that I was doing. It wasn't until Resolution 113 where there really was a desire to focus on this, and I think the interest and the efforts advanced. Resolution 113 with ABA urging providers of legal services to expand and create opportunities, but also urging clients to assist in the facilitation of opportunities. And that's really what it is. You know, it's both sides of the equation. It's the outside counsel and it's the clients of the outside counsel working together to improve outside counsel diversity. You know, so from a corporate perspective, I'll ask Ed, did Resolution 113 have an impact on Rockwell and its focus on outside counsel diversity? Was that kind of a pivotal moment?
I don't know if I'd call it a pivotal moment, but what I would say is that I think it helped to crystallize, you know, some of the provisions there helped to kind of give you buckets where you can help to, I'd say, understand what your law firms are doing on for DE&I issues, and as well collect information. So I think, you know, we were already doing some of those things, but I do think it probably helped to some degree to be a little bit of an accelerant, along with the fact that the ability to measure that data has become much more available than it had been when I was a much younger lawyer. And so the ability to, at a very quick glance, get data, whether it's you're pulling it directly from your firms or whether you're engaging with other third-party stakeholders like Sky Analytics, that is much more available now, and that empowers those folks who are willing to look at their data and to help them make decisions.
Yep, excellent. And how about you, Shannon? Did Resolution 113 impact Markel, or how do you see that affecting the focus and attention from a corporate law department perspective?
I actually have been thinking about lately that I think the benefit of it now is that it gives credibility to requests for diversity information. It's something that we can point to and say, look, the American Bar Association supports this. So I see it more as shoring up the case, which I wish we didn't have to make a case for it, but it shores up the case when we go to law firms asking for that diversity information.
Yeah, that's actually an excellent point, because, you know, asking for the data and receiving the data are two different things.
Right.
But it does add credibility, maybe urgency, need to those type of requests. Now, from a law firm perspective, Will, how do you see things like Resolution 113 impacting the law firm?
Sure. So one thing I would say is I think the focus of DE&I, it's just, especially when the clients are asking for information, it's just another reason why law firms need to listen to their clients. I think corporations of all sizes, nonprofit organizations are beginning to really want to see their outside counsel be diverse, but not only in appearances, but also sort of in thought and life experiences. It's reflective of society. It's more importantly reflective of their customers. So I think, as we'll talk in this panel, there's been well-established studies that show diverse teams produce better results, an increase in business. So I think the firms are, reacting to it. I think their firms are trying to respond to it. I'm at Littler, so we have the benefit of being a labor and employment firm, and we are certainly, diversity is on forefront for us because we are doing training for our clients. We're doing management training. We're doing sexual harassment training. We're doing diversity, equity, inclusion training. But one point I also wanted to make was that the focus on D&I is important, not only in terms of sort of outward facing to your clients, but internally for the firms in terms of recruitment and retention. So I really think, certainly attorneys are the lifeblood of any law firm. So not only what the clients want, but for the firm itself to sort of develop and grow, and again, attract the best talent. It's something they really need to be looking at.
Yeah, and actually that's also an excellent point, because in order for the law firms to be able to meet the requests and the demands in some cases of their clients, recruiting and retaining diverse talent is a key part of the equation. I fully agree with that. What I just kind of pulled up on the screen here is Consilio's 2020 Law Department Operations Survey, where as far as respondents, so corporate law departments responding to this particular survey, 21% of them saying they have an outside counsel or vendor diversity program, and another 32% having plans to implement one. So, in total, over 50% saying they have or will have, but that 21% number of those law departments that do have an outside counsel vendor diversity might feel a little bit low. Ed, these numbers here, are they surprising to you, or what are your thoughts on these type of statistics?
They're not surprising, because I think a lot of companies, because I also run an initiative here locally in Cleveland, where we partner with a variety of companies to help them increase their diversity spend, and with law firms to help them essentially increase their recruitment and retention of underrepresented groups. Those things are largely just kind of getting off the ground in a lot of places. There are companies that are really devoted to the issue and have been doing work. I'd say, though, that probably the majority of companies are still kind of reviewing their data and coming up with plans, but are not yet at a point where they're necessarily saying, like some companies, hey, you need to have this number, you need to be able to produce this metric. And so I do think that number is rapidly increasing, however, and I think that will have an impact on law firms as well, because historically, law firms have been relatively slow to adopt and quick to abandon a lot of diversity initiatives for a variety of different reasons. And it's only when corporate counsel, at least in my experience, it's only when corporate counsel are saying, hey, my expectation is we're going to have diverse teams, is that firms say, wow, okay, well, I think we can do things differently because we don't want to lose your business.
Yep. Agreed. And I think, you're touching on a couple of points too, as far as some of the challenges from a corporate law department perspective in, what is it that we should be looking for, and how do we get this data? How do we track this data? And I think we'll be touching on that as we go through this morning's presentation. So that's excellent points. As far as companies that are maybe more mature as it relates to diversity data collection, there are those kind of big name corporate law departments out there that have specific stated plans. Some of them are carrot type plans, so rewarding for meeting diversity requirements of your client. And in some cases, it's a stick, so penalties for not meeting the diversity requirements. And early this year, Coca-Cola kind of put what turned out to be a relatively controversial plan, where they were asking their outside counsel to have 30% of partner and associate time coming from diverse lawyers, half of which should go to Black lawyers. So 15% of that partner and associate time coming specifically from Black lawyers. And then a penalty, fee reductions for non-compliance. And then over time, those requirements were going to shift and actually amp up. That actually received a lot of pushback in the market, and Coca-Cola has since at least put that program on hold. I haven't seen that they've come up with a new requirement, but that requirement was for at least temporarily put on hold. But other firms out there, Novartis was an interesting case where they required 30% associate and 20% partner time coming from diverse attorneys, and their actual results were significantly higher. So as a result of that, no firms were penalized after they put that requirement in place. And I think that's a really good news story. The fact that they had a significance a significant excess over their kind of baseline requirement there. Facebook looking for a third. Hewlett Packard, a kind of stick plan, 10% withholding for not meeting their requirements. And then Microsoft having a carrot plan where they're giving out 2% bonuses to firms to meet their requirements. So, different organizations having different types of plans and different approaches. Shannon, is Markel at a point where they're asking for any specific requirements?
No, we're not there yet. We've actually spent the last 2 years gathering data in order to find out where we're currently at so that we can set goals for ourselves. But definitely when the time comes, our plan is to be, the so-called carrot approach. But also what strikes me about some of these requirements is that their definition of diversity is very limited, and it's women and ethnic minorities, and they're leaving out LGBTQ, disability, veteran status, socioeconomic difference, age. There's a lot of other ways to define diversity, because my concern with these types of requirements is that it disproportionately impacts smaller firms. And as someone who used to have my own law practice, it's difficult enough to compete with larger firms. And if these types of stringent requirements are being placed and then with such limited definition that, it's going to have a hopefully unintended, the effect is hopefully unintended, but it will disproportionately affect those smaller firms, which is what I personally am not a fan of. And we are working at Markel to make sure that if we have any kind of requirements, they be as inclusive as possible. And also, we're really just trying to win over the hearts and minds of our law firms. We want to work with people that actually care about these issues and not people that have to have a requirement on them in order to do what's right. So I'm not sure what it's going to look like in the future. We're still talking about it.
Yeah, and all points well taken there as well. In that, I agree with you. A lot of the focus does tend to be on race diversity and gender, but there are other things that can be looked at, and what that definition of diversity or DE&I should look like depending upon the size of the firm, the location of the firm. I know, Shannon, you and I have talked about location can have an impact on a firm's ability to meet certain requirements. And we'll talk about some of those aspects of and reflections of diversity on law firms and how those could be applied in different situations as well. How about Rockwell? Does Rockwell require any specific level of DEI, or what is Rockwell looking for?
Sure. In our space, we're looking for, we have two different, I'll call them diversity metrics. One is devoted to MBE, minority business enterprise, and women business enterprise law firms. And so we have a requirement in terms of spend, of monetary spend, with those firms on an annual basis. And so that's one of our goals. And then the other is that we're saying 20% of our, what I would characterize as majority firm spend, so not MBE or WBE law firms, needs to be with women and or minorities. Because at the end of the day, we're targeting underrepresented groups. And I do agree that we do also include LGBTQ, veteran status. The difficulty with those kind of what I characterize as kind of emerging metrics is, number one, LGBTQ is really dependent upon self-identification. Someone's gender in almost all instances is not dependent upon self-identification, and race, although there can be different slicing ways you slice and dice it, that also is something that people I think are a little more willing to self-disclose than someone's orientation or disability status. And so I agree that those are things that people, and we've got those on our radar and those are included, but at least to my knowledge, there's no LGBTQ law firm There's no veteran law firm. So it becomes a kind of, if someone is willing to disclose, great. And I think that can be included. So we have a few examples like that in our roster. But, from our perspective, it's, trying to move the needle on underrepresented groups. And historically, whether we like it or not, historically, the people who have gotten the additional work, additional opportunities in law firms since the beginning of time have largely been white men. And the needle hasn't really moved when you look at the statistical data. The number of minorities and women who make it to partnership and to the executive committee and to leadership within their respective law firms really hasn't moved in a material way in probably 30 years. And so there are outliers and differences in different law firms, but in large part, it just hasn't moved. And so from our perspective and others like us is that, the only way to move that needle is to say, and to be very clear. So in our outside counsel guidelines, we tell you that. In our outside counsel evaluation form, we tell you exactly how you're being measured. And we're very clear about the fact that we expect diverse teams to be deployed. And so, if you're, and we think that because we've got the goal for in two different kind of buckets, if you want to call it that we're kind of addressing some of Shannon's concerns while also trying to help move the needle forward so that firms think, hey, okay, if we're going to work on a Rockwell matter, we need to bring a diverse team to the table, or we need to have a very great reason why that's not possible. And then let's talk about partnering on how we can improve those numbers. So that's also part of our annual evaluation process with our firms, is to say, hey, for firms that are doing great, it's a pat on the back, great, you're doing great, keep it up, you're exemplar. For firms that are not doing as much, it's kind of, how can we do better? And we're expecting to see that commitment.
Yep. Excellent. And Will, from the law firm side, what do you see clients asking for? And, is it, and maybe even a little bit about the challenges associated with meeting those expectations of the clients?
Sure, Doug, thanks. So one thing I would say is, from my perspective, at least when we hear clients asking for, information about DEI stats and diverse staffing, for us at Littler, it's something that we love to hear because we feel it's an advantage. We feel it sets us apart because we can provide that information. We can staff those teams. I understand, in our pre call, Doug, that I understand that some law firms aren't able to do that. And I think, I'll address that part first, and then I'll answer the larger question of what are the firms asking for. In my view, I think if the firms are unable to say, oh, we can't meet these requirements, they're too stringent. In my view, then I think you're looking in the wrong places. You're recruiting in the wrong places. You're not looking hard enough. You're looking at you're recruiting from the same 10 law schools. Well, maybe that should be broadened, because I do think there are enough diverse law students out there, whether at be sort of at maybe more regional schools, but there's enough law students out there in my view. So that's my first response to that. My second thing is there's also how you hire and how you recruit. I'm sure diverse lawyers at maybe smaller firms who do apply to maybe larger firms. Then you have to sort of reevaluate your recruiting and how you're doing there. And then sort of the last sort of subject about that is sort of Doug, I've told you this, that we're seeing diverse associates leave at a faster clip at law firms. And why is that? Right? And that's law firms of all sizes. Are they getting the mentorship? Are they getting sponsorships? Are they getting an opportunity to work on the most important clients? So I think law firms that are struggling to meet these requirements are going to have to ask themselves, reevaluate their culture, reevaluate what's important to them, reevaluate whether or not they want to meet these client requirements. And they're really going to need to sort of start to do things, not only because it's right, but also because this is what the clients are requiring. So I think that's my response to regarding whether or not some of these requirements from clients are too difficult. with respect to what we're seeing the clients ask us for is sort of a little bit sort of what Ed had been mentioning. You know, they want to see the litigation staffed by diverse shareholders and team members, you know, sort of similar to, I don't know if any of you folks were on the GC panel yesterday or were able to listen to them, but they're also asking for information about minimum hours work, percentage of work, you know, and some are actually even going so far as to say, we want to know, you know, who the relationship partners are, who is actually receiving the credit from either the client originations or a matter origination. And other things that we've been asked from I guess clients are just, we want you to train our legal department and come in and sort of discuss DEI issues, why it's so important. So those are things that we're being asked. Other things that the clients are asking for, and maybe it's not just statistics, it's really just they want to understand our pipeline. What diversity initiatives do you have? What programs do you have? Not just what your stats are this year, but what are you really doing to just make a long-term change? At Littler, we have a number of programs such as the career advocacy program, which has, you know, really just, you know, matches sort of diverse senior associates with rainmakers, with people of influence at the firm, and just to really, you know, match them up so that they have mentorship and guidance throughout this process of becoming elevated to a shareholder. And I think that's so important. We actually sort of replicated that program, something called Investment for Success. So not only is it just senior associates now, we're really targeting and giving mentorship to any diverse attorney the minute they step into the firm. And I think you really need to do that sort of, and it has to be ingrained into the culture of the firm. Otherwise, you know, we're, you know, like Ed said, you know, it's really, nothing's really changed in their years. We're tired of statements. We want more. We want action.
Yep. Yeah, excellent. Now, is one of the challenges, I'm curious about this, Will, is one of the challenges in retaining clients due to perhaps the competition for diverse talent? Is there, you know, you talked about in recruiting, you know, making sure you're looking in the right places to find the diverse talent. But as far as existing attorneys and, you know, associates, perhaps moving from one firm to another, is some of that due to just the competitive aspect of building a diverse team?
Yeah, I think there's some of that right now. We're in the Great Resignation, right? Period. I think there's so many reasons right now, right? So I mean, I think certain practice groups are hotter. Some law firms are paying more money. So there are a lot of things. I mean, there's always, again, the competitive nature of law firms and where they're going. But I think also just fundamentally, people talk, people know, hey, you know, people can just look at a website. Do folks look like me on or at the management and shareholder level, at the partner level? So I think it's all of that, but I'm sure Ed and Shannon may have their own views about, even from a corporate perspective of the movement, because I've heard a lot of folks from in-house saying that they're having the same, you know, concerns.
And just to briefly amplify a couple of Will's points, I think, you know, no matter whether you're like Shannon and I in-house or whether you're at a law firm, candidly, it's going to require some intentionality to move the needle. And so in the past, what we've done, and I remember when I was a very young baby lawyer, there was a humongous initiative and all these general counsels all got together in their best suits and blouses and everything and brooches and, you know, and signed this great thing in 1999. It said, oh, we're going to do better. And my goodness, here it's signed by everybody. It's like a copy of the Declaration of Independence, got everybody's signature on it. And the only thing that happened was everybody smiled for a press release and got their picture in the paper. That's the only thing that happened. Zero happened after that, no action. And so when I speak about intentionality, I mean that for a corporate law department, diversity has to be on our GC's dashboard, full stop. Okay? So that's what's on. I have a quarterly review with all of our senior leaders within the law department, and we depict are numbers, and they're broken up by different practice groups. Same thing if I was in a law firm. The managing partner of the law firm needs to have that as a strategic imperative, full stop. Not, hey, we want to admire the problem and my goodness, let's, you know, some of you are probably too young, but there was this politician, Ross Perot, back in the 90s. And he used to talk about how he said the problem with corporate America is, you know, when you hear a problem that, hey, you know, we got all these snakes and they're biting people, corporate America says, well, let's hire a snake specialist to get a snake consultant to come up with recommendations about what we ought to do about these snakes. And he said, I'm looking for snake killers, period. And so, you know, we're looking to make action. And the only way to move the needle on something like that is it's on a dashboard that people have to review at a regularized cadence. And there's an expectation that progress will be made. And if progress isn't being made, then by default, you have to do something different. Just like if you're for too long, we've kind of been like people wishing they could lose weight. And they say, you know, okay, well, I'm doing real good, but they never get on the scale. And they're like, I ate watermelon only for 6 weeks. And I don't know how I didn't know. No. You know, you had some chocolate cake with that watermelon, get on the scale. And so everybody's got to get on the scale and pull their weight. And that's how you make change. And so we have an emerging number of companies that are saying, we don't like the results we've been getting historically. Because in the past, when I was a very, very young lawyer, they had, you know, firms would show up with this rainbow coalition of people. And the only thing missing was the Eskimo and the harpoon. But like a rainbow coalition of all these incredible diverse lawyers. And nobody had the ability or was disciplined enough to look at the bill and say, wow, this rainbow coalition had 2 hours on my matter that I spent $500,000 on. And wow, the only people who really got any playing time were the 2 guys who introduced me to the Rainbow Coalition. Well, now, you know, everybody has the ability to get that data very quickly. And so it can become very actionable very quickly as long as your intention to do something like that. And so that's where I think things are going, particularly as you see more and more diverse, more and more women and minorities are going into corporate counsel roles where this is an issue that's front of mind for them. So I really think firms that don't pay attention to this are ones that are going to be behind the 8 ball. And then I'll be quiet, but there is a question here just about kind of what corporate counsel are doing relative to helping partners on their end. And I'll just chime in briefly and say, I'm very knowledgeable about who works on my matters. So I have a global litigation perspective. I know who the lawyers are. I get reports, so I know how much they're billing. And so there are times in the past and currently where I have discussions with managing partners about, hey, you know, this person has been at X level for a long time, and I know how much I'm spending with them. Help me understand why they're not partner yet. And sometimes those are tough conversations, but they're conversations that people need to hear, because at least in Ohio, we have 9 law schools and maybe 3 legitimate cities where somebody might want to live. And so we've got a bevy of lawyers of all shapes, sizes, hues, creeds, everything. And so I could take my work anywhere. And so, you know, when those kinds of, and I tend to hire lawyers, not law firms. And so if that lawyer happens to leave and go somewhere else and they're doing stellar work for me, where there's a likelihood their work may go with them. And so I think that's the discipline that us corporate counsel will have to have, but that's the same kind of discipline that law firms in terms of their retention and recruitment are going to have. So I'll be quiet, I said a lot. So Shannon, any thoughts from your perspective?
Well, I agree with what you said. And actually what you said about we hire lawyers, not law firms, is definitely the trend with our hiring practices. So I'm a little bit unique in that I'm not technically in our corporate law department. I'm actually in the group that handles our panel counsel for our insureds. So we're moving away from having law firms on our panel and going to having lawyers on our panel. And the same thing, if we think someone's doing really good work and they move to a different firm, then we're going to move with them to that new firm, which I think, you know, adds some pressure to law firms, which they should feel, to keep people happy. that are, doing a good job for them and bringing in business. So I think, kind of the point of retention of lawyers at law firms and retention of people in a corporate environment comes down to why it's not just diversity, it's diversity, equity, and inclusion. And I would throw in justice. If the commitment to diversity, equity, and inclusion is not genuine and authentic, people can feel it. And that almost feels worse to be working in a place that's just paying lip service to something. So I think what came to mind for me was someone, I was at a conference earlier this week with Doug, and one of the speakers, Rebecca Ratliff, who's a mediator at JAMS in Georgia, and I've heard this in a certain form before, but not exactly the way that Rebecca said it was, diversity is being invited to the party, equity is being asked to dance, and inclusion is being able to request music from the DJ. So I think about that with our own recruiting efforts. We've made, we are in the process of continuing to make changes in how we recruit, how we describe our job positions, because women and minorities tend to look for an almost 100% fit in skill level before they'll apply for a job, whereas white men tend to apply if they meet at least 60% or less of the requirements. So, I think it is something that you have to constantly be including in your thought process. And the other part of it, along with the authenticity, is you, as Ed said, you absolutely have to have commitment from leadership or it isn't going to work. I talked to a couple of other in-house attorneys at this conference who were saying that they struggle to get buy-in from their leadership. They're being asked to do certain things, but then they're not giving funding or backup. And it is key. If we didn't have buy-in at Markel from our head of claims and our CEOs, then we wouldn't be succeeding. And it has to be a genuine buy-in. Again, I think without the authenticity, you're going to fail. So, we're at the point at Markel that I've heard our head of claims say, if you're not in the same frame of mind about being committed to these issues, then you should probably work somewhere else. So I think that's pretty great. And, so I think that authenticity and leadership support are two of the most important requirements.
Excellent points. Just spend a second really on this slide, and I think just kind of highlighting here that as far as corporate law departments and what they're looking for and the programs they have in place, like with law firms, I mean, it's not a one-size-fits-all type of effort. So there are those law departments out there where they're small, they're immature, they're resource constrained, diversity is not tracked or is not a priority. So that's kind of what we would consider basic. From an intermediate level, maybe they're collecting annual diversity data from their firms or other types of diversity information from their firms. So they're collecting the data, maybe at a high level, maybe using it a bit, but not completely. And then an advanced level, which is provisioning of additional diversity data, really driving deeper into the data itself in client-driven data points, and also putting in active staffing practices and accompanying reward to those law firms with additional work. And there's all different mixes of this. The point I want to make here is no one law department typically falls into any one of these buckets. It's really kind of a continual effort, and you're never done. Is kind of how I look at it. It's not like, okay, I'm in this box, this is where I want to be, pencils down, we're done. The effort and the efforts need to continue to advance within a corporate law department, and that measurement and focus and collaboration needs to continue. And what are your thoughts on this type of a maturity model, or that journey perhaps that a corporate law department might be going through in developing their program?
Yeah, I mean, I think this is a good model in the sense of kind of benchmarking your progress. And again, I think there are a number of corporate law departments that are still in the basic category. But what I will say is there are a growing number, an emerging number of companies. So particularly after the last 18 months and post George Floyd, you've seen a lot of different people, a lot of different corporations and law firms come out with all kinds of different statements and things. And so you're starting to see even more traction. And I think this is a good way to evaluate your progress, because I think until you actually pull the report and look at the data, you really haven't done anything from Ed's perspective, because it's just discussion. Once you look at the data, you may find, like some of my colleagues, I have a colleague of mine over at Smucker that makes all kinds of different jams and things here in Northeast Ohio. She hadn't tracked it and decided to start tracking it, and found out, that she had incredibly diverse slates for all of her work, and was really pleased to know that, even though it happened organically, probably because she had emphasized that throughout her engagements and things. So some people, I think, have some fear around looking at the numbers because they might not be good. But again, it's like when you want to drop 20 pounds, you at some point have to change and do something different. And so I think this is a good way to think about things, and it's the level of intentionality. So again, I think of this as a strategic imperative like any other corporate goal. And I think of it the same way if I was in a law firm. It is a strategic imperative, has to be, so if you're at a law firm where people are issuing all these grandiose statements and we're going to do better, then there's and nothing's going on. You have to question the leadership. And for some of the attendees, that firm may not be the firm where you want to land, because if people are not embracing this change in a meaningful way, they may not be as receptive when it comes time for you to get promotions to partner, counsel, equity partner, name the promotion. And now we're at a time where all that information is readily available. When I was a very young lawyer, the only listing of lawyers was a big black book called Martindale Hubble. There were no websites, or websites were just beginning to come, so you would pick a firm based upon what there might be a line of 20 lines about the firm in this big, huge black book that had every law firm in the country. And William was smiling, so he's seen this book. And so that's how you would be like, oh, well, they have a litigation practice and I want to be a litigator. Okay, well, and they say 70% is litigation. Great. I think that's where I'll go. Now everything is everywhere, and you've got more information than you can even process. So I really hope that young lawyers utilize that information to make some good informed decisions.
Yeah, I actually like the point you just made about how maybe law firms were selected in the past versus what the trend is today and how law firms are selected. I mean, Shannon's made the point, and you've made the point, Ed, as well, that you're looking at hiring attorneys, not firms. And maybe in the past it was, you would hire a firm based upon the type of work or practice expertise they have. But nowadays it's not just that's not the whole equation. It's what type of expertise do they have and who's doing the work, which is a big shift.
Dad,
So-
can I just
please.
mention, I wanted to bring up the point that, when you show the continuum on the D&I journey, as we refer to it usually, I think it's important to understand that everyone is on a D&I journey, or should be. And you can't expect firms to be perfect. And so our goal is for diversity amongst our panel is to look for firms and lawyers with a demonstrated commitment to D&I. And that means a lot of different things, so that if a firm is recognizing, look, we have a problem and we want to be better, then I'm happy to work with that firm. I'm happy to recommend they be added to the panel or continue to be on the panel. I had a lawyer reach out to me a couple of weeks ago asking if I would be willing to talk to their firm about how they could improve their diversity. That is a great sign of someone who has an actual interest in making an improvement. And the other piece of it, because we have had some firms push back and say, what are you, well, what is your D&I policy? What's your commitment to diversity and inclusion? And we always say, look, we don't think it's fair to hold you to a higher standard than we meet ourselves. Markel is on a journey as well. We're working on getting certifications around diversity. We're working really hard to increase the diversity of our workforce and do a lot of different things, but we're far from perfect and we're far from being done with the journey. And I think there is no end to the journey because the definition of diversity changes. We learn more and more every day about things that impact the diversity journey. So I think the important thing is not to be disheartened if you think, well, there's no way I could meet or my firm could meet, percentage requirements. That's not what all corporate law departments are looking for. And I think the more important part is saying we don't have all the answers, but we're working on it and seek partnership because we're looking for firms to work with that are going to be good partners with us. And so we look at it as a mutual relationship. And excuse me, sorry, it's an hour earlier for me than you guys. I'll give an unsolicited shout out to Littler, Will's firm. They are one of our panel, and I definitely keep track of, what I see them doing as far as diversity for their employees, different employee engagement groups that they have. So, remember that we're watching. I mean, with LinkedIn and social media and everything, your clients can see what your firm is doing. So it can be a positive thing to admit that you're just beginning the journey and that you're learning.
Right. And that's also an excellent point because law firms aren't going to be perfect, but neither are the corporates going to, the law firm clients perfect. So kind of keeping that in perspective is important. And the collaboration effort that you just highlighted, again, Shannon, is an important part of the conversation. So these are some of the things, and we've touched on these a little bit through what we've already covered, the types of attributes that corporate law departments might be tracking. What we consider the primary attributes, gender and race. Those are the common ones that people think of and or come to mind when you think about DEI. But there are the secondary or emerging attributes: disability status, LGBTQ, veteran status, and some of the challenges associated with collecting that data could be around whether or not the data is even tracked in the first place, because disability, LGBTQ, and veteran status are often underreported and or not reported at all. And then if the individuals don't have a problem reporting them, the law firm isn't necessarily tracking that information as well. These type of timekeeper level diversity attributes, and I think you've mentioned these a little bit. These are types of things that you're looking at Rockwell as part of the equation.
Sure. We're the only one we're not looking at currently is disability status. But again, I just, I think it will need to evolve. The one thing that I do want to remind people, to the corporate counsel who are on the call, is it's important to run individual slices of the data. So what you don't want to do is to fall victim to, hey, let's just put everybody in, we just want 30% of all this homogenized aggregate stuff. So you need to run the slices so that how are you coming out race-wise? How are you coming out gender-wise? Because there's one company that, their D&I journey was kind of, hey, okay, well, we're going to be very intentional about assigning more work to women. So we're going to hire a women-owned law firm to do some of our work. and we're going to give them 2 or 3 significant matters. And now we're done. So see, our numbers are better. Our spend is better. Wow. Okay. And it's all these women from a women-owned law firm. I'm a bigger fan of a comprehensive strategy because that may mean that you're not tackling the race issue. You may not be tackling these other issues. And so I think, and one easy way to do that I share with people on a consistent basis is any law firm that you have, you can call them up and say, I'm looking for a report broken down by race, gender, LGBTQ, pick your other variables over the last 2 years based upon the work that you've done for us. And unless the firm is made up of grossly incompetent people, they can provide that report in 2 weeks or less. Because now every firm of any size has someone who's the law department operations person or the marketing coordinator or name, or a D&I professional. So that report shouldn't, and if it takes months, you should really ask yourself what kind of firm you're dealing with, because that's table stakes now. And so now you get that data, and even if you don't have a platform to look at it, you can actually know how your trends are and that should be a part of the conversation you have with the firm on an annual basis because you're spending X amount of money with them. And so I think making those kind of expectations clear in large part does the job, because firms then say, wow, okay, well, I'm going to be measured on this. And they're going to measure me consistently, and we're going to gauge project progress every year. Okay, well, we may have to partner up and do something. And it's not necessarily like a dictatorship and like, hey, go do this. If we can partner on developing your younger talent, if we can alert you to laterals and things that might be interested in working at your shop who happen to be diverse and that you take seriously, great. So I agree completely with Shannon. It's not a, kind of go do this and then I'll sit up on my high perch and do nothing. No, this is a partnership, but there is accountability associated with it. So if your numbers continue to be substandard, it's just like anything else. It's a pass-fail world. So if your numbers are historically substandard year after year, well, you may lose work. And so it's just a reality of the situation.
Exactly. And Shannon, now you've talked a little bit about or mentioned kind of really having a broad definition of what diversity is and what that might look like for different firms. For these type of attributes, are these part of the equation for you, and or how is Markel using this type of timekeeper level demographics in their view of diversity?
So this year, we sent a survey to our about 100 firms that represent 80% of our legal spend. And our panel is close to 500 law firms. So, but 100 of those firms get about 80% of our work. So there was a survey that was sent by Doug's company where, because we use their product Sky to house our panel counsel information. So they were able to provide the individual firms with a spreadsheet of every timekeeper that had worked on a Markel matter in the last 18 months, pre-populated with any information we already had about those timekeepers, and then send them to the firms for them to complete filling out, the rest of the information that we may not have had, like disability status, sexual orientation. And, we said it was a voluntary survey to do, and they didn't, if they could only answer certain categories, but not others, that was fine. But we were basically looking to gather the information as, like I said before, more of a benchmark. And I will say, as a result of that survey, to Ed's point about, encouraging people to look at the data from different perspectives. When we looked at our data, we are doing great on gender. If you include gender in the diversity calculation, we're at about 50% of our legal spend is to women. We still have work to do in the equity versus non-equity partner category when it comes to women, which that is no surprise to most of the people and in the legal profession, I would think. But when you take gender out of it, we go down to about 15%. So, and that 15% is including every other category. So we clearly have work to do in the non-gender diversity space. And then, we're still working on kind of looking at the data from different viewpoints, but that was very enlightening to us that we're doing a good job when it comes to gender, but we have work to do when it comes to the other diverse categories.
Yeah, and that's an excellent point, is kind of how you're looking at it and slicing the data in different ways to understand what does that diverse profile look like for specific groups versus just everything combined together. Now, when we've done, Consilio has done many of these data collection exercises for clients. We've done them with Ed as well. But in some cases, the law firms resist. So our experience has been anywhere from 80 to 90% actually will comply and provide the data. I'm working with another client right now who we're close to 100% a response and providing of the data, which is encouraging as well. But I want to kind of throw a question over to Will from the law firm perspective. Are you being asked to provide this type of timekeeper level diversity attribution? And or are there any concerns with sharing this type of data with your clients?
Sure. To answer your question, yes, absolutely. Littler is fortunate to represent close to 70% of the Fortune 500 companies, and a lot of firms, a lot of corporations sort of in this spectrum of their DE&I journey. Some are a little bit more advanced than others. So a lot of corporate law departments that we work with are asking for the information that Ed and Shannon are sort of collecting already. And to Ed's point, I thought it's really good, is that a lot of these law firms, we do report it to like Law 360 and all those rankings, and all the law firms love to say, hey, I'm number one in this, I'm number two in that. So the information is readily available. So what I can share with you is that in terms of what we're able to collect, and it's on our website, just double checked. It's like, certainly the diversity of associates, shareholders, all attorneys, all employees. We also share the number of equity partners of color. We share the diversity of elevated partners. We share diversity of new hires. So we're really breaking it down because we know that's what clients are asking for. It's not just like this one bucket, oh, we're 30% diverse. Well, what does that mean, right? I think we also share, because we're proud of it, is the diversity of our senior management, our board. Our managing director is a woman. Our chair of the board is a woman. So, I think the firms that are able to show this information, this data that is readily available to them, will probably do better, in recruitment, retention, and for business purposes, like I've been saying this entire panel.
And just to follow up on that, Will, I'd be interested in hearing your perspective on kind of, as you're seeing more of these requests, is that manifesting itself in additional work for some of these underrepresented groups in Littler, and kind of how people are matriculating through your firm? I'd be interested in your view on kind of, from a global perspective, how that's working out. You've got a lot of offices, and so.
Yeah, absolutely. It really is. And the work is, as much as we have an emphasis on it, there's also actually action and work being done, right? As you'll see in my background, it says Ohana, right? Ohana is one of our affinity groups for Asian American attorneys, and we have the same groups for other underrepresented groups, right? And the answer is yes. And I'm usually staffing it. I've been litigating for 14 years. So my associates that we're working with are from the other groups, from BOLO, from all the other groups. So I think that, yeah, we have seen it trickle down. And in our view, we're labor employment attorneys. We all do the same thing here. So it's not like, hey, can you do this practice area? It's like, no, we're all of us, we all can do it, right? So it's not really where I could see other firms like, well, we really don't have a bankruptcy. Whoa, we really don't have this, we can't staff it. For us, it's either you litigate, you provide advice and counsel. There's certainly folks that do traditional labor, but for the most part, we're able to see the results. And that's an excellent question. It is trickling down, and something that, we're happy to see when clients ask us.
Yeah, and that's what I hope more firms do in terms of just making that part of their value proposition. So instead of the, rainbow coalition of people, your actions speak louder than your words. We have on our outside counsel evaluation form a whole section on what you're doing on DE&I, and part of that is your stats and spend, but the other part are kind of what are those forward-facing things that you're doing. And so I think to the people who are junior lawyers or at firms, I think it's a valid question that you should be, or if you're thinking about a different spot, I think it's a good question. Whenever the few times I've ever gotten pushback to providing data, I've had to remind just two firms that they're reporting all this data to now already. It's just aggregate data. All I'm asking you to do is disaggregate the same data that your same person is providing. And that's gotten over the hump of those couple of firms who are like, well, what about privacy? Oh my God, what if, are we going to be violating laws? And I said, well, we do leverage Sky as well. And so there's a consent on both sides. So someone can refuse to disclose, but all that consent is taken care of. And more importantly, again, this data is already being provided. And when I pointed that out to those couple of other firms, they didn't have the best response on kind of how they could provide it in an aggregate basis to get on the NALP rating, but not then provide me with the data on a localized basis or for my matters because of privacy concerns. So, it just doesn't compute. And so they relented, but it's interesting to me. You get these roadblocks and then people don't even know what they're actually doing already.
Yeah, and I just want to point out that the thing that was objected to the most was providing equity status. It wasn't gender, race, LGBTQ. The biggest pushback was we don't disclose who our equity partners are. Well, that makes me wonder why. Because I'm guessing it means you don't have good representation and you're embarrassed to admit it. But because every equity partner I know will tell you all day, every day that they're an equity partner. So that was noted when firms said we don't disclose our equity status. That did not sit right with us. So your response to the surveys, even if if you're refusing to participate, sends a message as well. But one thing I want to say that I hope goes without saying, we are not hiring attorneys just because they're diverse. You still have to do a good job. So we're evaluating not only your diversity, but your quality of work. So we're not going to have you work on matters for our insureds if you're not good at your job. It's just getting rid of the assumption that you're only good at your job if you're a white man. So it's getting more people to the table to give them an opportunity to show their capabilities. But if you don't deliver, we're not going to keep using you. That should go without saying. But I think sometimes people in the back of their mind think that women and minorities or, diverse categories get a free pass and don't have to be as good. I think Will and Ed and I are here to tell you that we have to be twice as good, if not 10 times better, to have gotten where we got in the first place. So, capability is still the minimum is you have to be good at your job. Now we're looking for the diverse quality. And I would argue one of the benefits of diversity is you are bringing something to the table that's different and that adds to your abilities to represent our clients effectively. So I just found it ironic that the thing that was pushed back on the most was not a diversity characteristic, but a level of authority within the firm.
Excellent. And the point you're making about quality not suffering for diversity, I think is an important point to make, because it's not a concession that companies are making to just have diverse attorneys assigned to their matters. Quality, that's expected. And then it's a matter of finding the right person, regardless of race, gender, et cetera, to do the work.
Yeah, just to amplify that one little bit is that I couldn't agree more with Shannon's comments, and, and to the attendees, really, I've even seen people there. I was not even aware of the new term for this, but they call that imposter syndrome, the new, vogue word for this stuff. If you're getting to do work for me or for Shannon or for anyone else, it's because you're good, you're great. Okay? And so don't think of you should disabuse yourself of the notion that, hey, I'm getting this work because I'm Asian American, I'm Filipino, and they're looking for, hey, the reason the firm hired you, presumably, unless they're grossly incompetent, is because they think you're good. And if you're bad, you won't get any work. And it won't be because you're Filipino or Taiwanese or anything. It's because you're bad. And the market sorts that stuff out. I don't give work to bad white male attorneys either, because they're bad. It's like it's table stakes. And so I do think I wasn't aware of the new vogue term, but if anybody's suffering from this imposter syndrome, you're at your firm for a reason. You're at your law department for a reason. Do stellar work. That's table stakes. That's non-negotiable. That is not something that can be avoided. And, but just know that there are a lot of people looking to diversify their slates of counsel and really want to have, and candidly for me, it's also to help us understand blind spots. If everybody, I wouldn't want to, as a Black male, I wouldn't necessarily want a trial team on every one of my cases to be all Black guys. That would make little sense because I litigate all over the country. And sometimes we're presenting to juries who have no Black people anywhere in the 300-mile radius. Mm-hmm. So we need to have some perspectives that are a little different than, urban Cleveland perspectives. And so, but that's what diversity is. It means that we're getting different types of people who can help us identify blind spots and come out with great results. And so just want to be, just because I have no idea how old the different people are on the call, but just to, just kind of get rid of that if that's something that's come into your mind for some reason.
So the next couple of slides, I just want to kind of go through pretty quickly, but talk about them at the end. So Mansfield certification. So what we're really focusing on here, a firm level designation. So other ways of looking at a firm's commitment to DE&I. So not just those timekeeper level demographics. So we've got Mansfield certification, which is looking for at least 30% women, attorneys of color, LGBTQ, and disabled attorneys considered for leadership or governance role, equity, partner positions, pitch opportunities, and as well as senior lateral positions. Other things that are looked at the firm level, NAMWOLF membership, so MBE or minority-owned law firms, WBE, as well as LGBTQ plus owned firms, which NAMWOLF is actually tracking for their members. Then there are other firm level recognitions that are in the market. Law 360, I think, was mentioned earlier in this discussion. Ring certification, which I think is one that Shannon has mentioned in the past, which is recognizing inclusion in the next generation, as well as the MCCA scorecard, which is based upon their survey data over going back 14 years, looking at demographics, recruitment, retention, and promotion opportunities. And one of the nice things about the MCCA scorecard is that they rank but group by size of law firms. So what that should look like for a smaller firm versus a very large firm can be a little bit different. And then there are evolving considerations and human rights campaigns, so the Corporate Equality Index, looking for LGBTQ plus equality in the workplace, other socioeconomic considerations, first in family to attend college, as an example, first generation American. I was actually talking with a company in the UK yesterday, and a socioeconomic consideration that they look at is whether or not the individual went to private high school, because that's kind of a UK thing. Age demographics, Shannon's made reference to that. And as well as the mid-sized Mansfield rule, which is a newer segment of Mansfield certification through diversity lab. Now, all of these together give different ways that you can look at and/or a firm can demonstrate their commitment to diversity. Now, Will, I know Littler is Mansfield certified. Has Mansfield certification been an advantage for Littler in today's market?
Yeah, I think so. Certainly, a lot of corporate law departments are familiar with the Mansfield certification. So I think from that perspective, it helps. It sort of just reinforces what Littler is about. But, you know, to the deeper question of how has it helped Littler attorneys, we actually, I was fortunate enough to attend the Diversity Lab Mansfield Client Forum this year with probably, I think I want to say 15 of my colleagues or so, all either women or diverse attorneys. And that was to me, that was the most beneficial because we had an opportunity to attend programs, network with in-house legal department attorneys, and just really do also practice pitch sessions to them. So I think in that regard, participating in the program, it's not just the label, hey, you're Mansfield certified. It's really going to these programs and meeting people and doing things. I think that was most probably helpful for the firm and its attorneys who were participating.
Yeah, and actually you're raising another excellent point because we've been talking a bit about the collaboration efforts between corporate law departments and outside counsel to improve or advance diversity in underrepresented groups. But the peer relationships that you're mentioning and that type of collaboration is also important. So what can law firms learn from other law firms who are on this same journey and having these same needs internally to build a diverse team as well as meet the requirements of their clients? And likewise on the corporate side, what different law departments are doing, how they're approaching it, how they're collecting this data, and what they can learn from each other. That's also an important aspect of collaboration. So, you know, collecting the data, how do you get the data? And there are ways, you know, and this is from the corporate law department perspective. So, you know, some companies, they've got sophisticated e-billing platforms, which have the ability to track gender, race, and other elements, primarily gender and race, but occasionally some other elements. And it may be a requirement of their law firms to populate that data as new attorneys are added to matters in order to, you know, and ideally make them required fields that are necessary in order for the firm to even be paid. But then, you know, Excel-based templates, you know, which can be created to just do outreach to your firms and collect the data. And those are the type of exercises that I've done for companies like Markel, for companies like Rockwell, and other of Consilio's clients. Now, when it comes to this type of data collection, Shannon, you've done this. Ed, you've done this as well. Has this type of data been valuable as you evaluate your firms?
Absolutely. We you know, the ability to actually see the data has been very important in having discussions with leadership, with the claims organization about here's where we are and, you know, here's where we can improve. And we're right now preparing a training for our claims examiners on the fact that we now have this data for, you know, the firms that they're using most frequently, and talking to them about the importance of utilizing our panel counsel database to search for diverse attorneys, diverse firms, to work on their matters. Maybe try a different attorney than, you know, their buddy that they went to law school with 20 years ago. So it's been very valuable. And, you know, Ed said this before, like it was gratifying to see that we were doing pretty well in the gender space, but definitely gives us the momentum to work harder on the other aspects. So it's very valuable from a reporting standpoint because we can tie the diversity characteristics to the legal spend, which, you know, is obviously a data point that our leadership is really interested in knowing how much we're spending, but also more importantly, where we're spending it.
Yeah, and similarly impactful for me as well. It's important because again, I think you've got to have some success measures in your metric. And so, for example, last year, our metric was 20%. This, because our fiscal year, unlike most companies, started in October 1st. Our metric this year is 30% in terms of our billing from in diverse categories from our majority firm. So we've upped that commitment based upon having the data to be able to know, here's what our spend was, here's how we came out, here's where we want to try and move the bar even more forward. So that data is critical. And again, I think if you don't have and the data is agnostic, it's like math, it just is what it is. It can't be argued. It can't be spun, and so you might spin your interpretation of the data, but the data is equitable, black, white, easy. And so I think, the more data that you have, the more you can empower your decision. So I really think folks either need to be pulling the data, like I said, do it yourself firm. I need the report 2 weeks or less, and then analyzing it yourself and asking the follow-up questions, or you need to be leveraging somebody like Consilio and Sky to help you filter the data. Because I think that's the only way at the end of the day, you need the data to make some decisions. And it could be, like I said, that you're doing great in certain spaces, and that's great. Acknowledge that greatness, but also in the spaces where you may need some improvement, the only way to measure progress is to have data. And so I just think that's table stakes. I do also want I think we're running short on time, but to the extent people have questions, they should put them in the chat or there might be a way for them to say them verbally. I think we have one question about, says, I feel like this was covered, but what are companies
And that's
doing?
my comment. That's my comment.
Oh, it's your comment. Sorry.
Go down to what are companies?
What are the companies? What are companies? Sorry about that. Just want to make sure we're getting it. What are companies doing to advance the prospects of minority associates being elevated to partners and equity partners? I think we covered that a little bit, but at least from my perspective, I know and I know from Shannon's perspective, I know who does the work because I've got a report with the data, and number one, I pay attention to my bills when they come in. And so if the bill shows consistently that, and I know who the lawyers are that do my work, then I know there. And then I run this report, I think about quarterly, that breaks it down. And so I know who does the work. And so I know and I know roughly what I spend because part of the report depicts how much money am I spending total with the firm and how much of that is from diverse lawyers of one type or another. So that's really actionable. So as we have those annual performance evaluation conversations with our key firms, that's part of the discussion. And part of the discussion as well is kind of, hey, I'm spending this amount of money with you. Talk about your future plans. So we'll talk about bench strength. I know who are my key lawyers. I know roughly how old they are and when they may be seeking to retire. And I know roughly who are the people who are coming behind them. The other thing that I do on my end is when I have a new matter, I look at the firm's website and I suggest diverse talent. So I look on the website, and I did this last week because we had an inspection and I don't have a firm in Seattle that I was leveraging. And so I happened to find a WBE law firm, and I suggested a diverse team within that firm to their managing partner. And they said, sounds like a great idea. And the only time that I got a pushback on that, one time in all the times I've done it, and the managing partner told me that this happened to be a Black female associate, was too busy to take on my matter. And I thought to myself, wow, when I was a young lawyer looking to get experience, there was never a time, even when I had back-to-back trials, there was never a time when I was too busy. Never. even if I was too busy, there was never a time when those words ever left my lips. And so I called her up and I said, hey, I heard you're too busy to take on my matter. Is that true? She said, no. And I called up the same managing partner and said, hey, I just talked to her. And she says she's got capacity. What about this team I suggested? And suddenly that team was acceptable. And so, sometimes you have to help fight those battles. But that happened to be her first, she was an associate, but that happened to be the first trial experience she ever got. And she did a great job. Now I could have taken she's way too busy, but I had to use some of this gray matter in my brain and say, when you were an associate, were you ever too busy to do work? Ever? No, that never happened. So I didn't think anything had changed in the ensuing years since I was a young associate. So I think we as corporate counsel have to take that. We have to be thinking about things like that. And then, we also need to have an open dialogue with some of those lawyers who are doing our work to understand their career progressions, what they're trying to do, if they're getting roadblocks. I have open lines of communication with the people who do my work because that helps to develop our overall relationship. So Shannon, I don't know if you wanted to comment on that one in terms of just career progression of people within the people who do your work. You're on mute.
Thank you.
No problem.
One of the points that Will made earlier was about origination credit, and there's credit for the client and credit for the matter. And so one of the reasons I left practice was because I did insurance defense work, and how was I going to bring in clients when the firm had every carrier locked down already?
Correct.
So I, was told by the partner I worked for, well, you can have my book when I retire. And yes, and I am 51 years old and that partner is still working. So I don't know when I was going to get clients. So I think that, so one of the things I love about my job is that I actually have a lot more power and influence now as the customer or the client to influence these types of things, that I don't want someone getting credit for a matter because they had a relationship 20 years ago and they don't work on our matters anymore and nobody knows who they are. I want the people that are actually doing the work. And I know everyone who's been an associate knows they do the majority of the work on the matters and they know the matter inside out, usually better than the partner. So that's one thing. The other thing is not necessarily related to diversity, but I think insurance companies have shot themselves in the foot by limiting the ability to have more than one attorney attend a trial. Because how is the younger generation going to learn how to do a trial if they never get to do a trial? So I started out doing family law. So I got thrown into trials from day one. Right. And you sink or swim and you learn. And once I went to insurance defense, in 5 years, I never was in a trial. So another reason why I left. So I think that's another thing that we need to keep in mind in the insurance industry, just in general, is that, we have to invest in the next generation. And if that means I'm paying for 2 attorneys to be at a trial, then, I don't really want one attorney handling a death case. So I think that's another area too.
And just one other thing I'm finding, I do want to hear from Will on this issue is, corporate counsel can insist on certain things. So I had a matter recently, a tax matter, and but the person who introduced me to the tax lawyer who could defend our interest happened to be a Black female attorney. And so I put in the engagement letter, and I said it, but I also put it in the initial retention letter that my expectation was that she was going to receive full origination credit. Again, easy things that I can do is one sentence, not very hard to type, even for those of us who didn't pay attention in typing class. And that happened. So I didn't leave anything to chance that, well, is that person, because maybe he was going to do it anyway, and that's great too. But when you're incredibly specific about it, amazingly, people follow your instructions.
Yeah. So I agree with what Shannon and Ed are saying. In terms from a law firm's perspective, the more direction we get from corporate counsel on these matters of who I want to work on and who should get the credit makes makes our lives easier. There's no awkward conversations, doesn't have to go to some committee. It's, this is what they want. For the most part, any law firm will have that issue. We try to minimize that, of course, but the more you say what you want and who should get the credit, you're just doing all of us a favor.
Yeah, excellent points there as well. In the last minute or so, I just wanted to kind of end on this this slide here, which is an important part of the equation as well. Is kind of like, how do I do this? How do I make this kind of part of the fiber of who we are as a corporate law department and how we engage with our outside counsel? So some of the operationalizing diversity initiative opportunities are outside counsel guidelines, including considerations there. Incorporating diversity data in your law firm discussions, review type meetings, annual meetings with your firms, considering certain diversity data during the law firm selection process as it relates to who's going to be doing the work, considering diversity and or commitment to diversity. Let's be broad about that with the members of your preferred panels when you do your panel reviews or create your preferred panels, and these collaborative discussions with your firms, understanding the D&I programs of your outside counsel, but also what are they doing to improve? Where are they now? What steps are they taking? Where are they going? And also setting some D&I themed personal goals. So all of these type of things. Ed or Shannon, I don't know if you have any kind of comments about what you're doing as organizations to just make this part of the fiber of how you engage with your outside counsel.
Well, Markel does it in a lot of different ways that we don't have time to go into, but I would say one of the most important things is to make it an actual individual goal at the employee level so that there's accountability for it, because if you can't do it or don't do it because it's the right thing, if you are accountable for it as a goal, as part of your performance, then it has more teeth.
Yeah, excellent.
Yeah, and I'd certainly second those. I think we're about out of time, but I agree. You got to make it operationalized, and you've got to have accountability measures, or nothing will get done.
Okay, agreed. Well, we are out of time. I would like to thank our speakers today, Ed Blakemore, Shannon Stevens, and Will Eng. This has been very interesting, enlightening. I've done these type of things many times, and every time I learn something new. And so I appreciate all of you for participating in this morning, and I appreciate everyone who's attended today's session.
Yeah. Have a good day.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you,
Bye-bye.
everybody.
Bye-bye.
Bye.